Welcome to the ReCommerce Podcast, the podcast where we talk all things ReCommerce and circular business. Today, I'm joined by Tuomo Laine, co-founder and CEO of Twice Commerce. Welcome.
Thank you.
Quick recap about the podcast so far. In the first episode, we talk about ReCommerce in general and what it is, and we kind of jumped into the different business models. In the previous episode, we talk all about resales, and this time we're jumping into the product servitization or product as a service model. So yeah, Tuomo, maybe you can start by defining what is product as a service or servitizing products.
Sure, I think product as a service, again, a lot of concepts that are related to it, but maybe the most simple way to define it is that when you access the product, you don't buy the ownership of it as part of the accessing of the product. So if you, instead of buying a car, you rent the car. So you rent the concept of the car, or you can rent even the concept of a Mercedes or whatever. Similar models, leasing or similar, where in the main gist being that you don't get the ownership of the car, you just get access to it. That's how I would define the kind of idea of servitizing a product. That being said, usually I think there's things that are connected to it. So not only getting access to the product, but there might be some additional servitization connected to it. So for example, promise of free or cheap repairs or maintenance and these other quality of life services that are attached to the idea. So I think that's the main definition. So instead of buying a bike, buying the experience or buying access to a bike and potentially other add-on services.
So I guess the product as a service can actually be multiple different type of business models or different lengths of purchasing the access.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's different parts that we can go into. There's like variations on the length of the access, for example, whether it's a fixed term access, so fixed term rental, short, long term, or whether it's a continuous subscription, for example. And then there are things like, does it include add-ons? Does it include, for example, X amount of maintenance, repair? Does it exclude some other additional services that might be, for example, digital in nature? So all of these things come into play, and from the seller perspective, usually they end up making a bit more cash, for example, on the add-on services that might be non-physical in nature, so digital services or similar, so with better gross margins. So it's the quality of life issues that people tend to pay more for.
And are businesses able to provide these different type of or different lengths of service, or are they usually focusing on, for example, short-term rentals, or how flexible are these different models or lengths?
I think it's connected to the kind of root product that you have. So if you have a extremely durable good, then it can withstand, for example, many cycles, many different users. So a car rental, a bike rental, sports equipment tend to be such that it can go from one user to another. There's probably no hygienic issues in most of those, or at least it's easy to kind of refurbish the item to be ready for the next user. So there you can probably utilize more of these models of short-term rentals and having many of those. If you're, for example, renting extremely high-end garments, it starts to be a question of the garment quality, how many usages you can actually get out of it. So there it might be a different quite a question. Or if it would be well, someone might have like socks as service. I don't think that they're gonna wash the socks and then give it to the next person. So there it's likely a subscription, an ongoing subscription that you're delivered fresh pair of socks, for example, every month. And maybe part of the service is that you return the old ones so that you don't have to do laundry or whatever. But then how they use the old socks, I would imagine that they probably then just recycle the materials or something like that. But you have these old school subscription services from like makeup and similar, where you kind of keep getting, for example, a refill bottle to some item that you use regularly. That is kind of product as a service. So, but yeah, you kind of end up consuming it as part of the usage.
So it can actually, part of the product as a service can be that it's kind of selling the ownership, or it's only one user per product, but then the company actually takes care of it like rest of the life cycle, and that can also be for the end consumer. Kind of I'm purchasing the ability to use socks all the time rather than these exact pairs.
That's kind of the idea. So and I think we can go, there's so many different categories of products that we could go through, but that's the main gist, that you're kind of buying the idea, buying the access, buying the experience of something. And then there's X amount of servitization that is either happening for the storage, on the ownership side, on the kind of other servitization side of things. If it's about consumables, so for example, one could say that, you know, shampoo is a product, but then you end up consuming the contents, but maybe the next kind of, if you're delivered the next delivery kind of delivery of the shampoo, you get, for example, just a refill bag or similar. So there's, you know, you still have the outer bottle that you keep on to or something like that. So there's so many different variations that we could probably find out. I think kind of all of those fall under a wide umbrella of product as a service, where the idea is that the seller establishes some kind of a service relationship with the customer rather than doing a one-off sale and then kind of trying to convince you to come again to the store to figure out what to buy.
Maybe on continuing on that, I can come up with like some issues already in my head, but what are the main challenges that the companies are facing who are offering products as a service?
Yeah, I think I'm not able to provide like an all-encompassing list on that, but there's always the kind of aspect of reverse logistics also included there. If there's anything that returns to you, anything physical that ends up returning to you as a seller, you have to figure out how to handle that inflow of goods or material. The other one is really kind of establishing some kind of a payment cycle. So if it's a short-term rental, you have to figure out maybe things like mitigating risks on the monetary side of things. So it might be that someone gets access to a good for cheaper than its main value. So that's usually part of the promise. So if I can buy access to an iPhone for 30 euros a month, it's still worth more than that. So some sellers must kind of figure out, what if that person just pays for a month and never returns the device? Are there some ways of mitigating that? There's a bunch of stuff that you can do with payment processing. It can be things like tokenizing cards, making sure that you have maybe authorized a deposit, or you can do after charges. There can be X amount of customer identification, verification, credit scoring, all of these things that are coming from the kind of fintech industry. So these are kind of things that come into play. In short term, in subscriptions, then there's things like, hey, how do we do subscription renewals? It's an art form by itself. It's the contract length, the payment length, all of these are kind of different. And in most cases, there's even regulation related to that. I think in the UK, there's actually quite strict laws relating to subscription of durable goods. I think there was way back in the UK market, there was a thing where consumers ended up doing quite unfavorable deals in white goods category, so washing machines and all of that. So there's a bunch of stuff that need to be taken into account in the contractual and risk mitigation and the reverse logistics side of things.
How can small businesses then kind of tackle this? Because it sounds like there is a lot of like more agreements and maybe waivers and all of these technology issues that you have to kind of go through compared to like regular traditional retail business models.
Yeah, definitely. You're selling a service, you might have some service liabilities there. I think it really, to put it simply, you need some facilitative services in between. So there are software like us and a bunch of others that try to help with the whole process, or like specific parts of it. There's, for example, our Twice Payments handles things like deposits out of the box. There are companies that specialize in waivers. There's companies that specialize in other documents that are needed, KY, knowing your customer or customer verification like Verif and all of these other things. So I think you need to kind of go out to the market and figure out what you need. And you might need to kind of take a really deep look into your actual use case and then think about, do you actually need all of these services? Because when you go into this rabbit hole, it can be it can be quite easy to see like red flags everywhere. All of a sudden, all of your customers seem to be the ones that are out there to do a fraud or similar. So it's kind of go to the market, see what's available. At the end of the day, know your customer base. If you're renting bikes in your local small town and you kind of know 80% of the customers, maybe you don't want to introduce a lot of friction for the sake that there might be one bad apple, and then just like calculate it as a cost of doing business if something happens.
Is it more expensive to start this type of business than traditional resale or even selling new stuff? I imagine there is a bunch of companies that are offering like everything that you need for these traditional businesses, but on the subscription and product or service side, like do you need more software? Do you need more agreements and all of that to get started?
I don't necessarily think that it would be that much more expensive to get started, but you might need a little bit different ways of financing things, for example. So if you're selling stuff, you kind of have to figure out how do you get the financing to buy the stuff, buy the stock, and then how quickly you sell it, and then from those sales and the gross profit margin, can you finance your other parts of the operation. Now, if your business is about short-term renting, it might be that it takes longer time than your sales cycle would have to kind of secure gross margin, because I bought the bike for $3,000, I make $100 per rental, I have to rent it 30 times until I've made my money back, and after that everything starts to be a profit. Now if I bought it for $3,000, I might have sold it for, I don't know, $3,600, or I'm not a professional in the bike gross margin market, but then anyhow I would have to make 6 rentals to reach the same as I would with the sales, but actually after that everything starts to be on my back pocket. So it again, unfortunately, kind of falls in the bucket of it really depends on the product category, because something like a power drill, people necessarily don't want to own it in small apartments. You can buy one for $200. People might be willing to pay $30 per day for it, and it quite quickly it can pay itself back. And then all of a sudden you have a fleet of power tools that are just generating cash for you a lot more hastily than any sales business could.
Maybe now it's a good time to jump into the opportunities, like you already mentioned that there is some financial stuff, but maybe talk a little bit about those and what are the other opportunities or benefits in this type of model compared to them.
Just looking at the market and then, well, thinking about the people, kind of the people's needs and the wallets of consumers and what they can actually afford to buy. So using a classic example, like I don't need a hammer, I don't need a drill, I need a hole in the wall, kind of that. That's the core reason why someone would go buy a drill. Now, using that in a dense city area, I think there's a lot of people that need holes in the wall to put stuff, TVs there, paintings, whatever. But most of them wouldn't probably say that they want to buy a drill. So that kind of says that the market is bigger for holes in the wall than buying drills. So there might be an opportunity that people are willing to pay a premium to get like the hole in the wall quickly delivered by DoorDash to your door in an hour. You drill the hole and then you send it out in 4 hours. I think that overall market can actually be bigger than the sales market of drills and how often people, after buying one, want to buy another one. So I think that's a big opportunity. Of course, there's opportunities from the perspective of sustainability and all of that. Then more longer term, just usually, if you do the math, it seems to be such that over time, if you have durable goods that you can servitize and sell out and kind of price in the service, not only the good, you end up making more gross margin. And I think that's the key thing that you don't want to forget is that services have better gross margin profiles. Gross margins are the things that you use to pay your operation and where you get your profits from, not revenue. So if you have huge revenues but you make thin gross margins, you have to kind of sell quite a lot. So if we can improve the overall gross margin profile of the durable goods market via servitizing them, probably the whole market can become more profitable in over time. And I think that's the big promise. But it's a big interconnected market, which is connected to things like how durable the goods are, whether they can even be servitized in the first place. But if we get there, I think there are a lot of these manufacturing markets that stand for quality and durability. And for those operators, it can actually be an extremely good model to go towards that servitization path.
Also sounds like there is quite a nice opportunity for new entrepreneurs to maybe start like as a side hustle and maybe have like a one bike, and after a lot of, let's say, short-term rentals, when you start to make that margin, then you purchase new ones. So you can maybe do it a little bit slower but more efficiently, or
Yeah, definitely. I think it's like if you look at an average US household, for example, if I remember the numbers correctly, they have about, let's say, $4,500 worth, like $4,500 worth of goods that they don't use, that are still quality goods. If they're able to monetize those, even though it would be one item that they monetize via renting it to the occasional user, like kind of the Airbnb of stuff, that is kind of a side hustle that you can put up. I think the question then is that when do you cross that threshold that you want to kind of build a brand for your side hustle? That do you go first to a marketplace that facilitates this somehow, or do you kind of start owning your own channel? And these are not excluding of each other, but I think that's likely for the ones who want to kind of start a business. That's the question: do I kind of start building this on our own, or do I start my own sales channel, or do I just use a facilitator that ends up taking 10, 20, 30, 40% cut of the actual, for example, rental price?
let's discuss a little bit more about that. If I'm a new entrepreneur and I'm really into this product as a service idea, like how do I get started? If I have basically nothing, I might have like an idea or product niche that I'm into and maybe know how to do some maintenance or some servicing. So how do I actually start my business?
Yeah, well, I think that last point that you made about you might be into a niche or a certain product, I think that might be, for most categories, it's almost like a need, because then in order to go to the servitization, two things need to happen. Well, that one item will go through many customers, and in between you usually have to do some maintenance. And if you don't know how to do that, that's probably the first thing to figure out, like how do you fix a broken thing? Maybe for some categories it's less relevant, that are like in nature more durable, that they don't have many fixable pieces. Now, that's a critical thing. Then I think that then the second question is that do you have the good? Like in the first place, if you don't have that item, you just have the know-how, then you have to go out there and buy those from somewhere, or get the supply, so to say, on which you run your business. And then lastly, I think for anyone starting a business, well, maybe the rule number 0 is that always figure out whether you have any customers before jumping in. So set up a website, set up a Facebook group, set up something, and start selling, and then seeing whether you get orders, and then figure out how do you actually fulfill those orders. It's a lot safer way to get to entrepreneurship is to figure out that I had sales that I kind of demand that I couldn't meet, than the other way around where I had supply for which I couldn't find demand. So the former is usually the better way to get into entrepreneurship.
And what if I'm a existing retail business and I'm interested in this type of new business model and kind of jumping into the circular business, and I want to do maybe like a pilot program or something like that. So how do I start if for my whole life I've been just doing like traditional sales, and suddenly I need to get the stuff back and understand what to do with those. So how do I get started as a retailer?
I think it's a quite similar story as for an individual. You have to probably first figure out how do you do the kind of repairing, refurbishing side of things. So what do you do in between two cycles of a rental, for example? Either you have to have those capabilities in-house, or then you have to partner with someone. So those are the two ways to go about it effectively. Like, do you build it in-house, or do you have it already in-house? And or do you go and find a partner that can help you out there? I think those are the things that I would kind of figure out as a first step. After that, if you're an existing retailer, you kind of already have the sales channels. You just need a way to host this kind of an offering. And there you have companies like us providing you with solutions that makes it effortless for you to put your offering out there. But then it is the like handling of the physical goods and how do you make them resellable after one rental is usually operationally the biggest question.
What type of business model or maybe multiple business models then should I start? Let's stay on the retailer example. So if I want to do a test here, do I start like a leasing program or short-term rental or mix of these, or how would you start your?
I think the important thing is that always start small. Like, don't try to make it a huge launch. It likely will not succeed, or the operational complexity will be too hard for you to operationalize. So always start small, pick 1, 2, or maximum 5 maybe leading products for which you try it. Short-term rentals are probably the easiest. Pick the products that are the most durable and need the least amount of maybe refurbishing in between. Maybe just an inspection that, hey, is it ready to go out again, that there's no critical damage. For example, U-Hauls or trailers are like car trailers are an amazing product for that. Effectively, you can just give those out and then when they are returned, see that if they're empty and maybe cleaned. And then if it's broken, it's kind of broken on a level that maybe it's less likely that it's gonna be broken. So I think those product categories would be the ones that I started with, or don't start with a PlayStation where you would have to kind of figure out, all right, it has electronics in it. Do we have to format it? Do we have to clean it? Are there any new stuff? Has someone fiddled with it? So start with something durable and usually dumb.
That trailer is actually really interesting because it's probably for hardware stores or similar. It's kind of like also additional service. Like if you're purchasing something large or something like that, and you don't have a trailer, it might actually just make it more intriguing to go into this store and buy this if I'm able to also rent out the trailer.
Definitely, I think that's like that, and that's a kind of great example of the servitization offer. Like, it's not cannibalizing; it's helping. If you pick your categories well, it's just supporting your mainstream business maybe. And many like retailers that we've talked with that have physical stores, like big box store chains or similar, the servitized product category can be kind of a throw-in product, kind of to lead people to visit the store, for example. Again, kind of driver for foot traffic and all of that. So I think those are the categories that you want to think about it. And it really kind of, when you start to look into your own industry niche, usually there's always something that kind of everyone needs but doesn't want to own because it's needed so rarely. It's extremely seasonal product or connected to a specific use case. So usually those are great candidates for servitization.
I can also imagine that those let's say trailers again, like something physical that is also visible. It's also nice advertisement for your company. If people are driving around with those.
If it's a big shiny trailer with your logo that everyone uses, it's free advertising on the roads. Yeah.
And actually, they are paying for you to do the
Exactly,
advertisement. So it sounds like a pretty nice use case for.
Yeah, I would say if you're a big box store chain and you have parking spaces where you can store a few trailers overnight, you should do it.
Maybe as a final question, or also understanding a little bit about you, like if you would jump into this and you're not a retailer and you are starting a new business here, what would be your category and how would you go about it?
If I put aside like any sustainability and such, I would just probably do ACs. I think many cities have a lot of people that when summer hits, everyone's thinking about, I would like to have a little bit cooler apartment, but they don't necessarily want to own it over like the whole year, especially in countries that have many seasons like we have here 4 different seasons. So there's like 3 months where the people's price sensitiveness goes away all of a sudden as the apartment temperature is like 35 degrees Celsius. So I think those are the moments where someone who would have a few ACs would be able to make a buck out of servitizing those.
What do you do with those AC units the rest of the year, so the 9 months when there is no...
You could probably find a use case for those if you really do, or then you just store them waiting for the next season again. So as a side hustle, that might be my 3 months of making some cash during summer vacation. And then again, I think an AC can last many years. So maybe that would be that. This came top of mind, probably having read a lot of global warming related news and thinking, how do we handle the heat waves?
Maybe as a final question to this topic, why would you do it as a product, as a service, rather than try to sell it? Because if people are hot in their apartments, they are probably also willing to purchase that.
Yeah, I think, but I think those people would probably already be served by the AC market. So I feel that there is a segment of people that want the relief but don't want to own it. And they actually might be willing to pay a lot more for it, like not probably exceeding. Some individuals might even exceed the cost of that because they know that they don't want to store it later. If you have a 35 square meter single room apartment, that AC eats quite a lot of space there. So I think that's why I would figure out that there's this market that is out there. Or if I would wanna double down and try to attack both markets, I would do a offering like I've seen some luxury brands do with like extremely valuable baggages and all of that, handbags. So where they effectively say that, hey, buy it from me for $4,000. If you sell it back to me in good condition in 4 months, I promise to give you $3,000 for it. So then that might be another way of making sure that my financials are a little bit easier. So I sell out all of the ACs, but with a guarantee buyback promise at the end of the summer if you don't want to keep it. So yeah, thank you for sparring.
No problem. But hey, thank you very much for this. I believe this was a lot of really nice information for a lot of people and maybe new entrepreneurs or existing retailers interested in this.
Yeah, super. Thanks.